In October of 2016, I attended a one-day fiddle festival which featured workshops by fiddlers from various musical backgrounds. I arrived at the workshop eager to learn all I could from the featured Irish and Scandinavian fiddlers. Little did I know that my world of fiddle and folk music was about to be turned upside down by a large, long-haired man with a French accent, playing music with a unique flair and a distinctive style that I had never heard before. My first exposure to Québécois fiddle music was love at first listen, and I was hooked. It's an understatement to say that I am extremely fortunate to have the acquaintance and assistance of a number of superb musicians and experts in the field of Québécois music. These fine and talented people were more than eager to share with me their knowledge, expertise, and wisdom. Information came to me through technology-facilitated dialogues via phone, Facebook, email, and Skype. Many thanks to Jan Falquet, Pierre Chartrand, Pascal Gem, the musician who started this all, Lisa Ornstein, and Nicolas Boleris. To settle ourselves in the background of Québécois folk music, we need to think about the history of European settlement in Quebec. Quebec, currently one of Canada's 10 provinces, was settled by the French in the 1600s and proved to be a challenging frontier to conquer due to its harsh winters, which were miserable at best and lethal at worst. Warmth and light shone into the French settlers' world in the form of music and dance. Dances were used as a way to mark holidays, stay warm, self-express, or participate in one's local community. We have little record of Québécois music in the 1600s, due to the Church's general disapproval at such merrymaking, but it's reasonable to infer that the earliest forms of Québécois dances were dances that were also popular in Europe at the time. The most common musical instrument found in traditional Québécois dance music, and really the mascot of the genre, is the fiddle. The fiddle was easy to handle in this frozen land. It was small and transportable, and could accompany itself with drones and double stops. Additionally, the fiddle was a relatively easy instrument for someone to make at home, though the sounds of these homemade fiddles were probably not up to the standards of modern ears. Although the bowings and articulations in the Québécois style helped to establish a rhythmic kick, some extra emphasis was required at dances. Thus began the tradition variously known as foot percussion, clogging, or podorythmy. Jan offers me this lore on foot percussion in Quebec.
And we don't know where it comes, but the story is that often they would, for parties in Quebec houses a long time ago, they would sit the fiddler on the table in order to have him high above the melee, the dancers, and so he would start to stomp on the table and realize that the good stomping would probably have a good beat so the dancers can follow the fiddle tune. Maybe the fiddle would be lost in the noise, especially if it was a homemade fiddle. Yeah. It became really a big part of the musical identity of Québécois traditional music, because again, it's something that's unique to Quebec. There's versions of foot tapping elsewhere, but I think Quebec is the only place where you actually put a microphone in front of these feet. Yeah. So, I mean, now it's even mic'd and recorded. Some bands record the foot tapping separately. Some people even record the foot tapping first, and they build a whole CD on that, like if it was a different instrument, a different person playing a drum set, for example. But if you listen, like what you hear now, if you think of Québécois music with like a very steady tac 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 and a fiddle tune, it's not, that sound is relatively new. Like it's from the bands from the folk revival of the 70s and 80s that really distilled that style in something really tight and really clear. if in older recordings there was sometimes no foot tapping, or sometimes some kind of cheesy spoon playing that that percussion of the studio would play.
Yeah.
Some drums, maybe there would be some foot tapping, but not as steady, or a slight variation of that rhythm. And all fiddlers had a way to play that stomping, which was not just a tack, 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 tack. It may have been something different. But now, because some popular band did that, and it sounds really great, it's very solid. Most young musicians just copy that style. And
the fiddle would continue to be an important fixture throughout the history of Québécois folk music, which would eventually come to be influenced by Irish, Scottish, English, and different North American folk styles. The combination of relative isolation from Europe and constant immigration also led to the development of unique types of tunes, one of my favorites being the brandy, a tune usually notated in the time signature of 6/4 and played somewhat like an Irish reel, but felt in 3.
we try to get lots of mileage out of the brandy, because it is very interesting for us, since it's a type of tune that's not Irish and not Scottish, and unlike most tunes from the fiddle world, because it's one of these tunes that's kind of like a reel, but in 3/4 time, or 3/2 time, if you want. So us musicians love them because they're fun, and also when we go and play abroad, it's something we can bring to the fiddle world that's pretty unique to Quebec. It has some cousins in other cultures, and one of them is the 3/2 hornpipe that we find in northern England. And according to some people, that's where the brandy form comes from. That's one version. Some other people think that maybe it's some weird adaptation of a slip jig, or maybe of other jigs. Another theory says that there's a tune called Drop of Brandy, I think maybe a Scottish tune, I'm not sure, but that a version of that tune somehow came over and was played, kept the name Brandy, and was that tune. But the reason I say we try to get a lot of mileage out of that tune is it's not like there's a lot of brandies around. Like basically there's one dance called The Brandy, that has a tune associated with it. There's many versions of that tune, but I mean, if you compare the amount of versions of the brandy to the amount of reels we have in marches and jigs, it's a very small portion from my understanding of it. But we do like to play it a lot because, like I said, it's unique.
Lisa Ornstein stresses to me that there is a great deal of intersectionality involved in the development of Québécois folk music throughout history, as one might expect from a primarily oral tradition, with influences coming in even from burlesque, jazz, opera, and more. I asked her if the style of Québécois music had changed over just the past 100 years. She responded that, with advances in technology, changes in economy, and patterns of immigration, it certainly had. Pascal was able to further this notion on a personal scale, saying that he himself had collected different influences from a number of different styles.
Whatever gets my attention, or whatever I think sounds cool, I'll just shamelessly try to steal. From my experience of playing with older players, they all did that. They all stole tricks from other fiddlers, and I think that was one of the points of at some point, competitions were very popular. That's one of the things that people would do, is like, whoa, that guy, gotta steal that lick, or that tune.
Another very prominent instrument in Québécois traditional music is the accordion, mainly the button accordion.
A little more than maybe 150 years ago now, roughly, the accordion arrived. There's some accordion that were shipped to music stores. Or actually, the first accordion that came to Quebec came to a convent where they were teaching young girls the arts of the high society, the music and science and all that. So the accordion was one of the accordion, the English instrument that these young girls could learn there at the convent. And that's, I just read, this was the first accordion that came to Quebec.
Other common traditional instruments include the jaw harp and the piano, which was easily accessible in village parishes in the 1800s. However, even in modern times, Québécois traditional musicians don't limit themselves to instruments that are considered to be more authentic than others. Since the North American folk revival, the guitar is commonplace. You will also find flutes, drum sets, and hurdy-gurdies, a fiddle-like instrument played with a crank and keys. One of the oldest active bands playing in this genre, La Bottine Souriante, even incorporated a small brass section into their instrumentation.
C'est la fille d'un pauvre homme qui se lève de bon matin du godin.
C'est la fille d'un pauvre homme qui se lève de bon matin du godin.
Elle s'en va au moulin pour y faire le mou de son grain.
Many groups that perform Québécois traditional music, or music in that style, are very capable when it comes to vocals and vocal arrangements. This harkens back to the early tradition in the region, where one's voice might substitute for a fiddle. This also helps give rise to the vocal tradition variously known as lilting, turlute, or mouth music.
But I think it's the same as, it's from the old country, I think, and also sounds that we make. Like some people, they use onomatopoeias that so I think it's just, nowadays people listen to the radio a lot, or like recorded music, and we have great gizmos to reproduce those sounds. But if you go back 100 years, people sang.
Yeah. Yes.
So maybe you're tired of singing the same song for half an hour and just going back to the first verse and adding verses of your own. It's just lilting. The melody is just human nature, I think.
Another notable feature of songs in Québécois traditional music is the aspect of call and response, which likely originated from Breton influence. This provides a way for an entire community to participate in the act of making music, even if an individual doesn't know all the words or doesn't like to sing solo, and is perhaps another remnant of a time when community was key to survival.
Sur la rime, don, de la ridène, sur la rime, don, de la ridée. Sur la rime, don, de la ridène, sur la rime,
Québécois traditional music can overall be considered to be highly diverse and historically differing depending upon region, immigration, available equipment, and social function. Nicolas sums it up this way. Our traditional music is a unique mix of cultures. Our songs are mostly from our old roots of French and Breton music. At the beginning of the 17th century, people from all over the west coast of France had a different way to sing and play music. In Canada, those different traditions became something new, with the presence of the First Nations. The other big influence came with the Irish and the Scots in the middle of the 19th century. When they arrived, they were Catholics, poor, and fighting the English like us. So we shared the music, but not the songs, because of our different language. At the end, we have French music with native soul and Irish instrumental music. Lisa warns against generalizing traditional music too precisely, noting that, as an oral folk tradition, it is messy, and it's nearly impossible to consider every single facet of Québécois folk music. Although a majority of traditional music in Quebec has its roots in dance, it's also worth remembering that musicians would have played for themselves as well.
If I can project myself back, the people who were artistically inclined or musically inclined, they have that urge to play music and they love it and they get obsessed by it. And I'm sure it was the same with a fiddler who would live in the middle of nowhere. He might play a dance every month, but he would play his fiddle for himself because that's I think the way it has been for a musician always. Yeah. So like people say, our music is dance music, and I think that's one of the big role for it. But I'm sure it's also music that's people played for their own pleasures.
As mentioned earlier, music and dance in early Quebec held an important social function. As Nicolas says, our music was and still is a way to be ourselves. With the way we lived 100 years ago, mostly in villages, the music was the only place to express and share. Now, our music talks about us, our happiness, our language, and the fact that we survive in English North America. He also adds, the music is not anymore a political statement, it has become a style of music, for the good and the bad. In this vein, I was additionally interested in knowing whether or not musicians were worried about the future of the tradition. The consensus was that they are not worried.
I'm not worried. I'm not worried. I think being worried about the continued existence of the tradition. Of course, in some aspects, it dies because it changes. Yes. So and the context is different nowadays.
And the way I see it too is I don't find there's a aspect of preservation in what we do. I think that, if it was not worth preserving, people wouldn't play it. So it's that we do it because it's fun and because it's great and it gives us pleasure.
But my point of view on that is there's so many people playing.
I'm not worried. I believe that people will make music because we're wired for it. Human beings, it's just our birthright. We come into the world with a brain that is wired for music.
But the people I think of, those young musicians, they play it because they love it, they're interested in it. They're hungry for it. They love to learn tunes. So yeah, I think there's future for that. I don't.
So there are people all ages playing, and one of the things that I always think is, are there more people nowadays that the population has grown so much? Are there more people playing nowadays than 200 years ago?
I think that there are people in Quebec who care very deeply about traditional music and who are working on various fronts to honor it and perpetuate it and innovate in it. So I think that, I don't think that's going away anytime soon.
I don't think there will be a much bigger part of the Quebec music consumption that will be trad music. We have a very small slice of the pie, and my prediction is that it will stay like that, but at least it will be good quality music that will be made.
L'habitant sème son grain lors du soir au matin, et sa femme en a bien soin, et sa femme en a bien soin. Oh, c'est un mariage que d'épouser le voyage. J'attends venir